Imagine if a country borrows around $50 billion every week. What could happen to its economy in the future? This is exactly the question now being raised about the United States, the world's largest economy. According to a recent report, the U.S. government has added nearly $1 trillion in new debt in just the past 5 months. Can such massive borrowing continue for a long time? And if it cannot, the consequences could affect not only America, but the entire global economy. Recently, the Congressional Budget Office, an independent research agency of the U.S. Congress, released its monthly budget review. The report shows that at the beginning of the 2026 fiscal year, there are no signs that the pace of U.S. borrowing is slowing down. In fact, the U.S. government borrowed about $308 billion in just the last month alone. As a result, the total national debt of the United States has now reached nearly $38.9 trillion. The biggest concern here is interest payments. When debt increases, the interest that must be paid on that debt also rises. According to the report, between October 2025 and February 2026, the U.S. government spent about $433 billion just to pay interest on its debt in only 5 months. Compared to the same period last year, interest expenses alone increased by $31 billion. However, one thing worth noting is that the deficit is slightly lower than last year. Between October 2024 and February 2025, the government had to borrow $142 billion more than it did during the same period this year. But this small improvement has not reassured economists. Budget experts say the current situation is not sustainable in the long run. Maya McGuinness, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, warned that interest payments on U.S. debt could exceed $1 trillion this year and could rise to more than $2 trillion by 2036. According to her, this cannot continue forever. Interestingly, economists are not only worried about the total size of the debt. Their main concern is the debt-to-GDP ratio, which measures how large a country's debt is compared to the size of its economy. If this ratio becomes too high, economic growth could slow down because a large portion of government revenue would be used simply to pay interest on the debt. Currently, the U.S. budget deficit stands at around 5 to 6% of GDP, while many economists believe it should ideally be closer to 3%. Another important point is that the recent improvement in the deficit is not mainly due to reduced spending, but rather because government revenue has increased somewhat. For example, revenue from import tariffs has risen sharply, about $109 billion more than last year, nearly 4 times higher. In addition, income taxes and social insurance taxes have also increased government revenue by around $132 billion. At the same time, government spending has also grown. In the first 5 months of the 2026 fiscal year, total U.S. government spending reached about $3.1 trillion, which is $64 billion more than the same period last year. The most significant increases came from 3 major programs: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, whose spending alone increased by about $104 billion. Overall, economists say that while the U.S. economy remains strong, the rapid growth of government debt could become a major challenge in the future. Because if the financial situation of the world's largest economy becomes unstable, it could have serious consequences for the global economy as a whole. Now, the big question is how the U.S. government will try to control its debt and budget deficit in the coming years, because the decisions made today will not only shape the future of the American economy, but could also influence the direction of the global economy.